Hello, everyone. You made it. You're here. Welcome to our first record book boot camp. Before we get started, we just want to let you know the lay of the land. This office is a big horseshoe, so you can use either of these doors to get to the restroom if you need to, and they're just right behind me here, so you just follow it around to the restroom. But it might be kind of funny that we're using a microphone in this room. You could probably hear me if I talk really loud. But this is going to be recorded tonight. You see the camera in the middle of the room. So that's why we're having to use a microphone. So just kind of bear with us, please. But without further ado, we're going to do some introductions and get going. So, well, first, my name is Lauren Corley. I am the Life Ready Program Assistant here at 4-H, and we also have Mary Lee, who's going to be giving the presentation. She's our Program Coordinator at 4-H, and we have Amy Worley. So she'll be telling you what you need to know about the fair books this year, and Amanda Morgan on the end is our 4-H agent. You should know her in Alachua County. And Rebecca Herm is here in the back waving. So if you have any horse book questions, she will be the one to ask about those. But here we go. Okay, so we're going to go over the types of books first. So there's three main types of books. Our 4-H project books, and if you've been a 4-H'er for a long time, you've probably seen these before. So the due date for those is June 1st, so it's always in the summer. And these books cover from June until May, and then they're due on June 1st. So this can be completed for any 4-H project that you've done. So that's any type of project that you've spent at least 6 hours on. We've seen books for leadership, for entomology, marine science, citizenship, photography, music, all kinds of cool stuff that you guys do already in 4-H. You can do these project books for. We also have the Alachua County Youth Fair Record Books. So those are due at the fair, and the start dates for those are written on the board over here. So we've got the steer's start date is September 5th of 2018. The swine start date is November 3rd of 2018. The goat start date is November 3rd of 2018. Rabbit, beef, breeding, dairy cows, dairy goats, and breeding goats are December 1st, 2018. And poultry is January 15th, 2019. So those are the start dates, and if you need to reference those later, they are written on the board. We also this year have a dog record book for the fair. So if you're showing a dog in the fair, you'll be doing a book for that as well. And then our last different type of book is our horse record book, which is due April 15th. And this book is required if you are showing your horse at Area B, in addition to the non-livestock judging poster that you need to submit for Area B as well. So, show of hands, how many of you are doing a 4-H project book? Alright, how many of you are doing a horse project book? How many of you are doing a fair project book? Okay, so we've got a good mix in the room, so that's awesome. So, we're going to move on. And Miss Amanda is going to come up here. So we're going to cover why you should do a record book, and we're also going to talk a little about parent involvement in record books. So how many parents have ever done a 4-H book before? Ah, good. Only the ones who are actually in 4-H themselves. So the reason that we do a record book, if any of you are interested in your career one day being in animal industry or something like that, this is super relevant, okay? Obviously, you'd be doing a record book. However, a lot of you probably aren't going to be doing a career in animal industry, but you're still getting life skills from doing these books. So, for parents in the back and, sprinkled throughout, how many of you guys have a budget? Yeah, I think pretty much most of the adults in here have some form of a budget. So, this record book is teaching you those budgeting skills. How many of the adults in here ever talk to another human being? Yeah, so you're getting communication skills from these record books as well. So that visual story that you have to tell and that project story you have to tell, hopefully we see improvement over the years in your communication skills increasing. So with responsibility, you have to keep track of your receipts. You have to know how much things cost. You have to know how much weight your animal has gained and things like that. And then it also just makes for a well-rounded project. So you are not showing these animals in the fair just to make money. You are showing these animals to learn life skills, okay? So whatever your project is, we want you to learn all kinds of stuff about it. So I'm gonna let Miss Amanda talk on that just a little bit.
So at the end of the day, basically, and I am an animal science person, so growing up in 4-H, I was involved in that, and then now I'm just lucky enough that that's kind of what I get to do a little bit now. But at the end of the day, whenever we hear you guys talk about your fair project, it is really cool to hear about how your herd has grown, or how you've learned all these neat skills and gotten to go to all these cool places, and it's led to all these opportunities. But at the end of the day, as your 4-H agent, what I'm looking for is to see how it's changed your life, how caring for an animal has made you realize that you need to care more about something else in your life, or how this experience has really kind of dove into the rest of your life and how it's affected that. So keep that in mind, that when we're looking at your books, yes, we're looking at what you're learning right now, what you've done, the records, but at the end of the day, and I know you'll realize when you get older maybe what I'm saying, but at the end of the day, we really want to see what you've learned outside of your project. Do you guys know what I mean by that? Shake your head, yes, no. So how has what you're doing in your project affected the rest of your life? So often we read project stories that, yeah, you're telling me exactly what I just read in your record book. But in your project stories, it's a great example in your visual story. We really want to see it come to life and see the different things you've learned about that. The reason why we really hone in on it being super important that you do the work is that none of those things happen if a parent is doing it or someone else is doing it, or if you copied your book from last year. None of these things we're talking about, or these life skills behind me, actually happen if you're doing that. So we're not trying to make it a pain for you to complete this record book. We're really trying to make it a process, and it's one of those things that you have to do, and you can do it just to check off the box. But what if you put that just a little bit more of effort into it, and you really do get something out of it? And I think the parents who have been through the program or have witnessed the program for years can really attest to the kids that put that little bit of extra oomph into it, not just for their project animal, but also in their record book. Usually, Amy, am I right? Usually the people that do that, they also put that little bit of extra effort into kind of everything else they do too. So, not saying that your record book's a reflection of you exactly, but it shows a lot about how hardworking you are, how detailed you are, how much you're really willing to put forth in a project. So keep that in mind as we move forward. And we do not want to see any parents doing record books. I remember as a kid, my mom and I crying over the kitchen counter on a project book, wanting it to be done, and it could have been so easy for her just to have written it and then me to copy it. And nowadays it's so easy with typing that really an adult could type it, or a sibling could type it, or you could just copy and paste from another year. But we really encourage you guys, and I think if you're here too, that shows a lot that you really care and you want to do it right. But make sure you do the work yourself, because otherwise you're not getting the full experience out of it. So with that, I'll pass it over.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. So kind of onto some of the basics. Like we said, there's so many different types of project books, and we're going to hit on different project books tonight. But overall, you should be using a practice book. So maybe and hopefully you brought one printed out with you tonight. This shouldn't be the project book that you turn in, because we are judging for neatness and things like that. So we want a place for you to kind of figure out your project and then finalize it. I know Mary Lee and I did a practice book for this tonight, and we had to do a couple pages a few times to hit all the things we wanted to hit. So make sure you have a practice book. Use a pen, not a pencil. That's whenever you're doing any official documents, that's just a rule of thumb that you want to use a pen. So that means either black or blue ink. We don't want purple or red or any of that stuff. Yes?
Except for juniors in your fair book for Alachua County. Juniors can use pencil in your final draft.
junior fair books can use pencil. So, sorry for that. Thank you for that correction. You want to print neatly. If we can't read what you're writing, there's chances you're not going to get the points for that. Fill out everything completely. That's the way you're going to get the full points. And it's just also another good life skill. If you're ever filling out a form, you want to fill something out in every blank. I talk about writing checks. You want to fill out every spot there is something to write something on a check so somebody doesn't come in and write something maybe not true later on. So that's just a good habit to get in. And then finally, ethics. There's obviously the animal ethics that I think a lot of you are going to be learning about tomorrow morning as well. But also signatures. So there's a few signatures required in here, and make sure that your 4-H leader and your parent has really reviewed your book and that it's their signature that we're seeing on those forms. And so this is the first rubric page. You see rubrics kind of scattered throughout the room. You'll probably hear us say this a lot tonight. Do it by the rubric. You hear like, do it by the book. That's also true. Do it by the book and by the rubric. Our judges, whenever they're looking at your books and all of your hard work and hours you put into it, this is what they're looking at. This is what they have to go off of, so you might as well start there. So this is just the first page tonight. We're going to go through an intermediate book. The junior rubric is slightly different, but similar concept, so just make sure you have the correct rubric when you're doing your own book. And here's the second page, and I'll hand it over to Mary Lee.
Alright, so just to kind of give a quick overview of how this whole presentation is going to go. We are going to be going through mainly 4-H project books that'll be on the left side of the screen usually, and then the Alachua County UF Fair book, specifically the breeding animal record book. We just picked one to kind of go through. They're all very similar. If you see this blue or teal box around it, it's the fair book page, okay? So we're kind of going to be comparing the similar pages. And then we're going to also look at a good book and a not so good book and talk about why one book is better than the other, okay? So when we're comparing those books, we are going to be using the 4-H project book simply because Miss Lauren and I were not going to fill out every single record book. And then at the end of the presentation, Miss Amy is going to go through some of the specific pages in the fair books that aren't necessarily with the 4-H project book. So I think it will start to make sense once we start getting through the presentation, okay? Alright, so on the cover page, both books basically ask for some general information, your name, the project year, your age, things like that. Like this book is asking you to circle your project. So we're going to compare the cover page on the left and on the right. So like we said, everything is by the rubric. So this is the rubric section that is specifically for the cover page, okay? So looking at these two pages, we've got one that's filled out, this one's filled out as well. Who can, just looking at that, looking at the rubric, which is also the rubric that's on the tables in front of you, who can raise their hand and tell me what score you would give this page on the left? I see a 2 back there. Okay, so I'm going to agree with that. This one is a 2. Who can tell me why it's a 2?
Because it's neat and well organized.
Okay, she said it's neat, it's well organized, it's got everything filled out. Who can tell me what they would give the one on the right? What would you give it? Okay, so I got one who says that he'd give it a 0. Okay. So we're giving it a 0 because it's not filled out correctly. So see how we've got everything shifted down a line over here? So that's just kind of a matter of not really paying attention to what line things are supposed to be on. We also have, if you guys can notice, they've used last year's book and scratched out the number. So it says 4-H age as of September 1st of 20, and then it's kind of not, you're not sure what it says because they just scribbled it out instead of using the correct book, okay? So since it's not filled out correctly like the rubric says, they get a 0 for it.
And just to touch on that, Mary Lee updated the books today, the record books on our website. So whenever you go to print out your record book, make sure it's the most recent one, and on the bottom it should say updated as of today's date, the 11th. So Make sure you have the right one this year. Okay, so same process. On the left, we have our 4-H project book, and on the right, a similar page in the fair book. So this is where you're getting the signatures that we talked about and talking about the dates of your project. So what would you guys give this one on the left? Well, let me tell you what the rubric says. Could get a total of 2 points. So read your rubric on the table. What do you guys think? See some 2s in the air, maybe? Okay, I can't see all the way back. So, this page gets a 2. Everything's neat, completely filled out. You see their dates are back in May, when they should be, and the signatures are accurate. So, then on this second one, can you guys show me what would you want to give that one on the right? Out of 2 points. We've got a 0 up in the air, we've got a couple 1s, a couple 0s. Okay, so why? I already gave away the first reason. What do you think is wrong with the date over here? You want to make sure it covers both years, your entire project, right? Okay, and what else do we have? So the dates on the right were all signed in December, so kind of like last minute. So that's being extra nitpicky. If you get your book signed, that's okay. But we're looking for that you did this book overtime and you didn't just do it the day before the fair. And finally, that signature says Mrs. Kodak instead of the parent's full name. So just hitting on that ethics that we talked about before. Make sure your parents and 4-H leaders are actually signing it. So even though it was fully completed, because of the ethics issue, we had to give that book a 0. So that's that page.
Alright, so this is a page that is not going to be in the youth fair books, but for those of you who are doing your 4-H project book, you will need to do a project commitment page. So we can already tell some pretty big differences between these 2 pages, right? So which one has more information on it? You guys can just yell it out.
1.
Yeah, so this one over here has more detail, okay? So right here, I know you guys might not be able to read this, but it says, this is what my leader agreed to help me learn. And it says, my leader agreed to help me find a professional photographer who will let me shadow them. So this is a photography project book. Over here it says, this is what my leader agreed to help me learn. Photography. Okay, so we kind of see the difference. So this is specific to what a leader might agree to help your project with, okay? So what do we think we're giving this one over here? You guys can just yell it out.
3.
All right, 3. I agree. What do we think about this one over here?
0.
0? All right, so first, they put this in the wrong spot. So you can see there's a blank left open. So we're giving it a 1, and here's why. Your rubric, it says 0 means missing or not filled out. Is the page missing?
No.
Is it filled out? Yeah, it is filled out. It's got something in every blank, right? So we're giving it a 1 because it is filled out, but the commitments are maybe a little too broad, okay? So one of the additions this year is that we have added signatures because we see the rubric says missing signatures or dates. The old books didn't have a place for signatures or dates, but the new ones do. Okay, and for the goals. So we talk about SMART goals a lot in 4-H. Here's our rubric, so you guys get the drill. What do you think? You don't have to raise your hand, but what do you think we'd give this one on the left? It's hard to kind of read, there's so much in there. You would give it a 5, okay? Anyone else have, so I heard a 4 maybe, okay? So out of 5 points, we gave it a 5. So if you read your rubric, so you might think, maybe not give it all the full points because there's 2 missing, but on the rubric it says you need a minimum of 3. So because this person put a lot of effort into their 3 goals they gave, we thought it earned 5 points. Okay, what about the one on the right? Guesses, can I hear them? I see a 1, 0,
5, 4, 1.
now we're just counting. So there I circled, it says you need at least 3 to-do items, so we had to take off some points here. We gave them a 1 because there was also just that lack of effort that we were talking about. We want to see, especially goals, that's really going to direct your project and those outcomes that you're going to write about in your project story and in your photo story. And Miss Amanda mentioned, these goals are really important, so we really want to see you putting forth some thought into them here.
Alright, so this one has kind of a lot going on with it, and it is specific to your 4-H project books and not in the fair book. So the journal page is a page that we usually see a lot of issues with because a lot of the other things that are in your book, even later on, should be on your journal page. And if you read the instructions on every single page, a lot of them say these things should also be in your journal. So we need you guys to kind of make sure that you're taking note of that and putting all of those things in here, okay? So we've got, this one does have a lot. So over here, we already know that this is the good page, right? And then this one's not so good. We can kind of tell that visually. So we do have a missing blank here, so they're gonna lose a point for that for sure. There's also a bunch of missing blanks on this other side. So this one has some pretty good descriptions of where it is. They indicated whether it was an expense or an income. You can also use a negative sign, which would go before your dollar sign, or you can use parentheses around the whole number. So those are ways to indicate negatives, and then if it's positive, then you would just write the number. You can also see right here, see how I've got NA written there? That means not applicable. So for that particular column, it means I didn't earn an award. So just like Ms. Lauren said, you wouldn't just leave it blank, but you're gonna put NA there so that somebody else couldn't fill it out later. So in this other book on the right-hand side, you can see that there's an X on one, there's a slash through another one, there's an NA somewhere, so it's very inconsistent. So we want you guys to be using, and this applies to your fair books as well, if a block doesn't apply to your book, you don't just cross through it or totally leave it blank. You need to indicate to us, or to the judges, that it doesn't apply to your project, and that's why it doesn't have anything, okay? So that's something to think about. Also on this right-hand book, you can kind of see, you see all of those empty blanks and just general inconsistencies, some sloppiness and things like that. So one of the changes this year is it used to say date and location in this tiny little box, okay? That's really hard to do. So we move location over here to give you guys a little more room, so that's a difference. There's a blank there, so they get a point off, but they did a really great job on everything else, so they get a 9. This other book has a lot of issues going on, so they're getting a 4. So they're getting a 4 because the items are listed, they're not really clearly described, and there are some items missing from other pages. So we'll see later on in this book, they mention that they go to Camp Cherry Lake. So Camp Cherry Lake was relevant to their project because, again, later on you'll see they took photos at Camp Cherry Lake for their photography project, but then they didn't put it on this page, okay? So those are things to keep in mind with this page if you're doing a 4-H project book.
Okay, financial summary. Is this their favorite page? This is not my favorite page, but here we go. So it's important to know where your money's going and to keep track of that. So on the left we have our 4-H page. You'll see expenses on the top and income on the bottom. It's small even on the computer screen. And then on the right is for the fair books. So fair has a little bit more going on because there's feed and non-feed expenses, and they want those separate, but then all of the income goes on that last final chart. So are you guys following? Does that make sense? You separate your feed and non-feed, and then in your project, it's just income and expenses. Reverse. So, okay, we wanted to talk about lining up your numbers. So, if you can see on this book, this is $10, 10 decimal point 00. And all of the numbers are lined up to the right. So they're right justified so that the decimal points all line up. So whenever you're managing your finances, it's important that when you're looking at a document, it's clear where the decimal point is, where the comma is, where the dollar sign is. So we want to make sure everything's really neat and tidy. and that your descriptions are filled out like we've been talking about. We will be checking your math. So if it's money in and money out, make sure you're calculating your math correctly. And right here, I'd like to point out, does that look right? Is that how one of the ways we said to do dollars, negative signs? No, yeah. So the negative sign goes before the dollar sign. That's a simple way to designate it. And the total time spent on your project, this says parentheses project journal. I learned this today. I didn't know what this meant. This means this time is coming from that journal Miss Mary Lee just showed you, where you're keeping record of all the things you do in your project. So add that up, and that's your total time working on your project, including the time that you spent working on your project journal. So you could include tonight in that time, because you guys are here working on that. And the financial summary, your assets, expenses, income, change in inventory, and profit over there on the right. So, and each description, it tells you which page. So just like your journal says, include this. Just like the record book says, include this in your journal, the fair book says, include this in your financial summary, and here's where you can find it. So you should have already filled it out on another page in your book, and you're just putting it all in one place here, okay? So I make that super easy. They tell you what page to go to, so that's awesome. Okay, and then here's everything all at once. So I know it's a little overwhelming, but we have our expenses and income, and we totaled it out over here. We see that this person, so even though they didn't fill out the whole chart, your total still goes in the bottom right corner. So on our good one, they did it correctly, but on this one over here, they didn't put the totals in two of their charts, so they're going to get docked some points. They didn't use decimal points, so the page contains some errors. So this first one on the left gets 6 out of 7 points. We took 1 point off because they put the minus sign in the wrong spot. And then this one gets 1 point because they're missing a lot of expenses. It's not completely filled out. Like we mentioned before, it doesn't show that Cherry Lake should be here. So things that they've mentioned in other parts of their book, just make sure you're consistent throughout talking about the same stuff. Okay, and since they missed their totals, that was the big deduction. Make sure you total that out. Okay, you made it through the money stuff. Here's your
So actually one more thing about the money stuff. So you guys might have noticed, I'll go back to it. So at the end of the project, how much money did this person lose? Anyone?
2.
So they lost $228.67 on this project. Now when you guys are doing your especially for your market animals, for example. So a lot of times it might seem like you do lose a lot of money, which can be very realistic. So for the parents in the back, you guys are paying for all of, like if you have a dog or cat or just some pet, aren't they kind of expensive to keep? You gotta buy food, you gotta pay vet bills, all that kinds of stuff, okay? Same thing with these market animals. These creatures can be expensive. Now, when you guys are selling these animals at the fair, do you guys think that you're making more or less than what an adult who is just raising these in a business would make?
Less.
You guys are making so much more than what an adult professional in this business would be making, because we've got people that you guys go out and get your buyers, right? They're supporting you. They're coming to support you guys as 4-H and FFA members, okay? So they're giving a lot more than they normally would for these animals. So sometimes book totals are super in the negative and you lose a lot of money. And that honestly can be pretty realistic. Sometimes your book totals make it look like you made so much money because you maybe went out and got a lot of buyers and they were bidding against each other and jacking the price up a whole bunch. Okay, but that's not necessarily realistic. So just keep that in mind, that sometimes, you know, these numbers are going to be a little bit different than they might be in the real world, okay? And just also look at the total number, because if you're losing a lot of money, that is a lot of money that you're losing, okay?
Now, Mary Lee,
Yes.
also on this page, they won't be able to fill this page out till the end, till they get their check and everything at the end. So,
Okay, so for the video purpose, Miss Amy just mentioned, no, you're good, just mentioned that you guys won't be able to fill out this page for the fair book until after you've already gotten your check and everything, because obviously you don't know how much you're actually going to make, okay? So just keep that in mind as well. Alright, so for presentations and demonstrations in your 4-H project books, once again, we can kind of see that there's a pretty big difference in these two pages, right? So on the left over here, looking at the rubric, what do you guys think? And you can yell it out. What score do you think this page on the left is going to get? 10, okay. Who can give me one reason why you think it's going to get a 10?
Because it's mostly filled out.
Okay, yeah, because it's mostly filled out, and plus we can see over here there's a lot of blank space over there, okay? So we're going to give this one a 10, and down here in the results, so this is a presentation on how to use your cell phone as a camera. The results section says, I felt confident about my demonstration. 2 of my club members sent me cell phone photos that they took after my demonstration. So they're giving not only how they felt about their presentation, but also something that came of it, okay? So they really paid attention to the fact that their club members learned something from their presentation and they reported back on that. So for those of you who don't know, Miss Amanda gets to do a super huge report at the end of the year where she's got to talk about all of the awesome stuff that you guys learned, okay? So we're kind of asking you to do the same thing where you report back on the stuff that you've taught other people, because you guys are teaching some really awesome stuff. I bet every single one of you in this room knows something about your project that we have no idea about, okay? Because you guys are showing some animals that I've definitely never showed or never owned. So you guys know a lot of stuff and you're teaching a lot of stuff, and we want to know about that. So this book over here, or the page on the right, what do you guys think about the score for that one? Just yell it out.
7.
7. I hear 7.
4. 8.
I hear a 4. I hear an 8. I hear a 7. 5. Okay, so we're kind of all over the place. So we're going to look at a few things. So we see. Okay, so Miss Amanda brought up a good point. We're going to talk about where you guys can do some presentations and demonstrations. So on this page, it's got 4 different levels. So it's got club, county, district, and state. You can also do national presentations, but we'll get to that one day. So for your club, how many of you guys knew that you can ask your club leader if you can present to your club? There should be some hands raised because I know some of you guys have done this. Okay, so you can present to your 4-H club. All you have to do is ask if you can, and that's a really great way to get experience. How many of you guys are friends with other people in your club? Good, I see so many hands, that's awesome. So it's a place that you guys are going to feel supported. No one's going to be mean to you or judge you or anything like that. They're just going to want to help you do really well in your presentation. So the club is a great place to start out. So county level, if you guys are looking for an opportunity to do a county level presentation, on January 25th, we have a thing called county events, okay? And you guys can still sign up for that by the 21st, and it's an online registration. And you guys get to do either public speaking and do a speech where you're standing up and giving a whole speech about whatever your topic is, or you can do a demonstration where you've got some type of visual aid. So it could be a PowerPoint, so like this would be kind of a demonstration, or maybe if you are doing something on horses, you might bring in a saddle and show people how to clean a saddle or something like that, okay? So that's a really good opportunity to do a county level presentation. And then you can also, if you do well at county events, you can move on to district events. And we also have our district council, which is a great way for intermediates and seniors to really get involved at the district level. And then at the state level, especially for seniors, you can go to an event called 4-H University. And if you do well at the district level, you get to present at that state level as well. So there's all kinds of different opportunities. There's more than that, okay, but that's just kind of an example for each one. So if you're looking for opportunities for presentations and demonstrations, there are so many. There are plenty out there. All right, so for the scoring on this right side, we can, I know it's kind of hard to see, but they started to write the word PowerPoint and they misspelled it, so they scribbled it out and wrote it next to it. Please do not do that in your final book. That is something that you do in your practice book, and then in your final book you make sure it looks nice. They also, on this particular spot, it says when it was given, but they only put where it was given, and they put at their club meeting, okay? So you have to also put where it's given, or when it's given, which is really just a matter of make sure you're reading the instructions on every single box and putting things in properly. And we've got a lot of blank space, okay? They didn't even fill out the results section, so we don't even know if their presentation was good or bad, okay? So our final score over here is a 3. So it says no presentations or minimal effort. So obviously they did a presentation, but it definitely was that minimal effort. So the reason why they wouldn't get 4 points, in that category it says a minimum of 1 presentation with all sections filled out completely with specific descriptions, or multiple presentations and demonstrations with poor descriptions, content and results sections lacking, okay? So they would have had to do a lot more to even get that 4th point.
Okay, and citizenship and community service, it's pretty similar to the page Ms. Mary Lee just covered. So you can get a total of 10 points on this page. Obviously, we know which one's the good page and the not so good page already. We gave 10 points on the left because they filled everything out thoroughly and well, and then on the right, they didn't fill everything out, and we gave them a 4. So they did community service, and they did it, but there could have been more detail. So that's why we're kind of harping on. We want to know what you learned. We want to know the next step beyond, okay, I gave a speech at districts. Well, a lot of people are going to give, or I gave a speech at county events. A lot of people are going to do that. We want to know what was unique to your experience and what you learned from it, okay?
Alright, so this leadership page, this is also a page or a section that is in your fair books. It's toward the end of the book. So for leadership, this is an optional section for juniors, okay? So we understand that juniors might not be stepping into those leadership roles yet, and that's okay. But for our intermediates and seniors, you guys should be stepping into some leadership roles, okay? So we've got 2 different sections. There is leadership activities that you were involved in, so it might be learning about leadership, and then leadership activities that you actually led yourself, okay? So we've got goals at the top, leadership activities that you were involved in, leadership activities that you actually started or led, and then again, the results. So if you guys are noticing, results is on a lot of these pages. And results is also in your fair books. It might not say the word results exactly. However, when you're calculating out final weight and stuff like that and all your totals, that's also a form of results, okay? So one thing I want to point out on how did you do in results. One says the photography exhibition went well and 2 of our club's Cloverbuds entered photos in the exhibit. So they gave us a number about something that happened, something they learned. And this other one says, it went great, okay? Now this is something that we've actually seen in books, okay? And we're not just putting this out here because we think it'd be funny. We've actually seen people say on their results sections, it went great. And that's not really telling us anything. So we want to actually know what you guys learned, and we don't get to know that unless you tell us. So what would we give this book on for the page on the left? You guys can yell it out. 10. Okay. Oh, it's a 9. Why is it a 9?
Because it didn't always get it fit out. Yeah.
So here's a lesson in judging. It's subjective. So we try to train our judges to be very consistent, and typically they are very consistent. But it also can happen that one person might look at a page and give it a certain score, and another person might give it a 1 or 2 point difference, okay? So they might give a point more or a point less, but that's also why you have multiple people judging your books, so it works out. Yes. So up here it says month/year, and this person put the entire date. So that's just a super minor thing, but it's just an example again of pay attention to what the instructions are and what the book is telling you to do, okay? So on the right, we can see over there that they misspelled photography. They put photography. So that's something that's a little bit different. Who in here knows what law is? Okay, I don't see any hands raised, which is fine. If you don't know what it is, that's okay, because they didn't explain it to you. This one did. It's Leadership Adventure Weekend, okay? So don't assume that your judge is going to know what all of these different acronyms and stuff are. So what do we want to give this book over here on the right?
7.
7, 4, 3,
5.
5. Let's see.
10.
Alright, we put a 4. So the leadership activities are present, but a lot more description is needed. So that's, for example, saying law. It should be Leadership Adventure Weekend. Tell us what that actually is, okay? It also says leadership goals are generic or unrelated to the project. So their leadership goal was to teach people about photography. So that's pretty generic, whereas the other one wanted to teach 3 clover buds in their club about photography. So they were just a little bit more specific on it.
Okay, finally some pictures. This part can be fun, but you kind of need to think ahead a little bit. So, what do you think about, we're going to pretend that everybody did the 5 required, okay? We're just showing 2 examples up here. But if you had 5 pictures that looked about like this in a project story, the purpose of this is to tell a story. So we want to see when you first get your animals for your project, or you first start your photography, you get your first camera or something, and then we want to see the progression throughout. And then at the end of the project, think about that last day when you're filling in that last fair book page. What did your animal look like right before you went to the fair? So, with all that in mind, checking out our rubric, a total of 10 points, what do you guys think this one over here would get? Shout it out.
A 2.
A 2.
Because it says
Yes, because it just says me and my cow, right? There's no punctuation, that's not a full sentence. It doesn't really tell us anything about your project, okay? So we thought the same thing. Oh, we thought 0. So can anybody else point out maybe something else that's going on in these photos?
0.
What's wrong? Shout it out.
she's not doing it.
She's not really doing it.
She's not doing anything.
She's staring at Phil.
She's staring at it. So what we were noticing was this footwear of choice over here. She's out on the field.
What's safety?
There's safety problems. So we want to make sure that you're practicing the appropriate safety techniques that you're learning in 4-H in your photos. So we've seen that as well. So we're just clarifying. So that kind of put her out of the count. So Miss Amanda just said this is kind of like Instagram versus business. We're not looking for Instagram posts that'll get lots of likes, okay? Your judges aren't going to give you any likes. They're just not going to give you points, okay? So remember that we're trying to learn here. So on the right, this was a really good project story. We went ahead and gave them 10 because they're doing something with their animal. Somebody pointed that out. They're grooming, they're walking their animal, they're demonstrating the skill, and they're communicating that clearly. So that's the type of photos we're looking for, and with making sure you're being safe. So the captions say, on the left, she's grooming her cow. So it says, I practice grooming my heifer a little bit every day. In this picture, I'm shaving the longer hairs on her face to get ready for the show. This makes her look more appealing to the judge. What she's doing, why she's doing it. And then on the right, my club leader taught me how to practice walking with my steer. If I didn't practice this, he wouldn't be good in the show ring. So something they learned in a club, and understanding how that's applying to their lives. We don't want you doing this all in one day. I know I've harped on this. We want to see the progression. So you're in the same outfit every day. It's the same sunset in the background. That's not what we're looking for. So please show us you're doing your project throughout over time. And I think that was it. That one.
All right, so for your project story, now this particular set of instructions comes from the 4-H project book. And the fair book, it tells you to tell a story written in a narrative format that shows what you learned about your project, and it gives you the word count. It doesn't really give you a certain layout to use or a format to use because it's a little more open-ended. You can write it however is going to work for you. However, if you're kind of stuck and you don't know how to start your fair story or what it should include, we're encouraging you to kind of look at this 4-H project book layout just to get you started. So we're not saying that you have to follow this exactly for your fair book too. We're just saying that if you're not really sure if your fair book story is covering everything that it should cover, 1, look at the rubric. What does the rubric ask you to include? And 2, take a look at the 4-H project book instructions because they're going to give you just sort of a starting point, okay? So with your story, this is the best opportunity in your entire book to let us know what you learned, okay? So when we are judging these books, we want to know, did you learn responsibility? Did you learn communication skills? Did you learn leadership skills? Okay, we want to know those types of things. Not just, did you learn about how to take care of this particular animal? We definitely want to know that as well, okay? So there's going to be a lot that's included in your story. We want to know the hard skills that you learned. So hard skills are things like, how do you groom your particular animal, or how do you walk it in a show ring? All of those things, those are hard skills, things you can actually go out and do and all of that. We also want to know these other life skills that you learned. Like I said, that responsibility and communication, leadership, those types of things. We want to see those coming through in your project story because that's what lets us know that you guys are actually learning something from these projects, okay? So like I said, this is coming from the 4-H project book, but if you kind of start with this, it's going to really help you with your fair book story too. So those two things are going to be very similar, okay? So reading the rubric, I'm just going to go ahead and read this out. I know we haven't done that on the other ones, but we're not going to sit here and read a whole story. We did not write those. So for an incomplete, you get 0 to 3 points if you have no story, weak attempt at a story, no introduction, only one skill or influence described, and not written in a narrative format. So a narrative format is like a story. So it's not an essay about cow diseases. It's a story about you and your project, okay? So for 4 to 6 points, the very first thing says introduces member. So if you, in your 4-H project book at least, if you did not introduce yourself, but the rest of your story is the most fantastic thing in the world, how many points do you think you can get?
7, 9, 8, 9, 10, 0.
So if you did not introduce yourself, you can only get a maximum of 3 points, okay? So that's a minor thing in the project book that can be easy to miss, but that just goes, again, to read the instructions and read what it's telling you to do. Now that's the introducing yourself is specifically applying to the 4-H project book, but in your fair book, read the instructions. There's a minimum word count in the fair books. So if you need to write a minimum of 100 words and you write 99, it's going to be the same thing. You're not going to make it beyond this category, even if those 99 words are the best words we've ever read, okay? So that's a matter of read that rubric and read those instructions, okay? So even if it's a little detail, make sure you're reading it. So for the exemplary story, so exemplary means the best of the best. It says written as a narrative, so in that story format. Quality of writing reflects the member's age. So if an 8-year-old is using super huge words that mom and dad just happen to know, we're going to question that a little. We don't want to see an 8-year-old story looking like an 18-year-old story. We want it to reflect their age, or reflect your age, okay? I guess that was speaking to the parents a little. So if you are a junior member, your story should sound like it's written by a junior member. We're not going to judge it as if you are a 16-year-old. We're going to judge you like a junior. Intermediates will judge you like an intermediate. And then at least 3 significant ways that the project has influenced them. So once again, This is the same thing that we've been saying. We want to know what you've learned. Okay, that's so important, and that's what these books are about. Okay, and something that is just in our 4-H books is your opportunity to do curriculum. So it says there's a minimum of, to get the full points, you need 3 or more activities. So if you have a book on photography that maybe Miss Amanda has directed you to, or like a book that we used to have in the office or you can find online, you need to write on the left the chapter, the title, what you learned, so very explicitly what Miss Mary Lee's been talking about. What did you learn when you did this curriculum book? When did you do it? And then your leader's signature, just their initials, saying that yes, you did this book. So on the left, we gave this person 4 points. It was well filled out. They did at least 3 activities. And then on the right, since they just did the 2 activities and it wasn't so neat, we gave them 2 points. But they still had their initials, it was still a good effort. And there's a little bit of sloppiness. There was a coffee stain on this piece of paper, so that's going to get them docked points in neatness. So if you spill coffee on your sheet, that now has become your project, your practice book, and you need to get a new book to turn in. Alright, so talking about goals, once again, this is a 4-H project book specific page. However, how many of you that are doing livestock books set goals for yourself? Might not be on paper, but how many of you say, you know, I want to reach this goal in my project this year? So next year, I want every single hand to be raised because you guys should all be setting goals for yourself in your project, okay? That's how we do anything. So like the 3 of us that work in the 4-H office, we set all kinds of goals for ourselves. We wanted to do this 4-H record book boot camp, and we wanted a bunch of kids to show up. Here you are. And we wanted you guys to learn something about it. So later on, you guys will have a super short survey that you can let us know how we did, and we can know how we met our goal. We didn't necessarily write that goal down anywhere, but we know it and we're trying to achieve it. So on the left, you guys can't really read this, but both of these books brought in the goals that they put at the beginning, okay? So that part, they did a good job. You should bring in whatever goals you wrote at the beginning, make sure they're here. The book on the left is obviously very descriptive, and the bottom one, it says, I should have visited more local art galleries and talked to more photographers. I did not get featured in an exhibit this year, and that was one of their goals, was to get featured. So do you think that we are going to dock points for that because they did not meet their goal? Yes, no? No. Okay, good. That's a great answer. So we're not docking points for that because they described how they can do better, like what they should have done to reach their goal. It's okay if you set a goal for yourself and you don't reach it. That's totally fine. That just means that you can work towards it again and recognize the things that you need to do in the future. So what do we think the score for the book on the left is?
1, 2,
Okay, I hear a 5.
2,
I see a 2.
2,
Okay.
3.
So we went ahead and gave this one a 5 because they had 3 goals at the beginning. They brought them back to this page and they described how well they met their goals or didn't. And then what about the book on the right?
2.
2. All right, we gave it a 1 because one of their things about did you meet this goal, it says my photos look better now. Okay, so they didn't actually say how did they do that? How did they make their photos look better? So once again, that's just going back towards be detailed, be descriptive. We don't know what you guys learn unless you describe it to us fully. Okay?
So, a lot of you that do turn in these project books and record books, we know who you are, we know what you do, but whenever you're writing these, we have to kind of take it at face value for what we see in the book. So even if we know you presented here, did a really awesome community service project, if you don't write it down and show us in your records, we cannot judge you for that, if that makes sense. So if you've done something, you've done it well, this is the easy part. You just record it and write it down. Yes.
So, this one's pretty easy too, but knowledge and skills gained. So kind of like the unmet goal that Miss Mary Lee talked about. It's okay if you don't reach a goal. It's okay if you don't learn every checkbox in your one project. So we want to see that you have thoughtfully filled this out. So that's on the rubric. So you would get 0 points if you don't fill it out, which this is the easiest page, so please fill it out. You would get 1 point if you fill it out, but it seems like you just checked it off without thinking, which is definitely what we see on the right. I think there's more check marks than there are boxes on the right, so that was just careless. But we really want to see what specific things you learned this year in your project so we can compare that over time and see, you're not going to get docked points if you don't check all of them. We just want to see what you learned. So, this one on the left got full 2 points, and the one on the right got 1 point. And Ms. Maryland's going to talk about the career study.
Alright, so this is an optional page in your 4-H project book, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but basically, if you want extra points, this is an easy way to do it. All you have to do is pick a career related to your project and just do a little bit of research on it. You don't have to spend hours and hours on it. Honestly, a quick Google search with some good sources, some reputable ones, is going to get you where you need to be. So basically, we can kind of tell the one on the left tells exactly what an event photographer does. The one on the right says that they take photos. So there's just a little bit of difference there. So we gave the one on the left 10 points and the one over here 4 points. We gave them 4 because they did it, and in order to get 4 points, it was good effort but needs more research. Sections filled out but not specific. And that describes that page exactly. They're filled out but they're not very specific.
Okay, and finally, the scoring system. So, this is just kind of tallying up the whole rubric so you can check here and see what parts are worth more points. And the career study is extra, like Ms. Mary Lee said. We've been going through an intermediate book tonight. So there's also junior and senior. So the intermediate and seniors, as you can see on the left, have the same rubric and the same scoring system, but the juniors on the right is a little different with that exception that the leadership page is not required. So that just gives you an idea of what you're working with. And then next, this is our junior rubric. So just make sure that you're using the right rubric, because as you saw tonight, we were definitely led by that. Your judges are going to be led by that. So do everything by the book and by the rubric, okay? And you'll be good. And now we're going to have some fun with the fair book and Miss Amy Worley.
Maybe.
Okay, this is our health record treatment paper. I'm trying to think which way I have to look. The one on the right is for beef, and the rest is rabbit and poultry. This is also in your swine book. This one's also in your goat and dairy. So with this, I guess I'm going to be very detailed. So anytime, like health certs, anything like that that you have done for a vet that comes out, we want to see it. So if you have multiple animals that's going to be in your book, you need to write that down. With the rabbit diseases, they want you to research, put it in this, write it in. Poultry diseases, same thing. They just want the kids to learn about the diseases that those animals can have. But the biggest thing, in filling these in, showing who gave it, expiration dates, lot numbers, withdrawal periods, and what medication, and if it's a preventative, a maintenance, if they were sick, just tell us that.
Amy, I have a question on that.
Okay.
It's changed since the
Yes, ma'am.
Now it says to draw a map, and it used to have the.
Well, you don't draw a map.
Okay.
There's no map to draw on.
Right, but it said that.
I know.
earlier, so I was just clarifying.
That was my fault, I didn't take it off.
Okay.
Same thing, the breeding, loss, and section. Bear with me, guys. Okay, this one is for the rabbits. Same thing, they want to see, you know, like a breeding plan. If you have rabbits that are in production, they want to know, you know, are you breeding them? Are you not breeding them? If not, they want to know, you know, do you have plans for them? If not, then tell them, you know, I have no breeding plan at this time. Cows, dairy goats, same thing. You know, if you have multiple, you know, if they're bred, open, pregnant, when their due dates are, if you have one that's not of age, you know, we plan on doing this with her when she becomes of age. But be more detailed than that. Don't, you know, the thing is, we want to know your breeding plan, what you plan to do with your herd. Same thing with dairy cows. Same thing. Theirs is a little bit more detailed. We want the sire's name, registration, if they're bred, exposed, and everything.
Maybe, do you have kids that you know have breeding plans but don't put it in their record book each year?
Oh yeah.
So,
And I know kids that are very, very, very involved in the cattle industry, and you know, it's a shame because they're very educated with it and can teach other kids about it. So, you know, and when I say, you know, tell your kids, tell us what you want to do with it, because sometimes we like to pull different sheets out of the record books and use them as examples to be able to show. Project inventory. This is the poultry one. Now, if you bought a bird, you put what the beginning balance, what the bird cost you. If you raised it, obviously it didn't cost you anything, but you can put a price on it, so that gives you a value, or you can put 0. Your ending value is going to be a guesstimate. So if you were going to sell that animal, what would you sell that animal for at the end, is what your ending value is. So you would incorporate, amount of feed that you fed that animal, amount of care that you've done for that animal, is what your ending value would be. So your total price would be whatever you chose. And then you would add everything up. So no matter what she's saying, whether the kids are using the milk or if they're selling it, it has a value. So they have to fill that out. This is for the market animals, so market swine, goats, goats, wethers, and our steers. So you are going to have your weigh-in date, and then you periodically should be weighing your animal. And then if you read the way that it tells you, you will be able to come up with these date, the totals, and then the date. You will be able to come up with these date, the totals, and then the days. The best way to get your dates is either count them out on the calendar, or I use the computer and it pops it up and gives it to me. But then at the end, you'll have to fill it out on our final weigh-in date too. So, but this is for the market animals only. This is not going to be in any breeding books. Buyer interviews. This is for market animals too. We encourage, especially, do we have any seniors in here? One, okay. Seniors and intermediates, we encourage them to go to new buyers each year and get interviews, a new person. Juniors, we're a little bit more lenient, but we encourage them, everybody to get one of these signed off, that they went and talked to a buyer. It's, you know, like Miss Amanda and Lauren and Mary Lee said, public speaking is part of it. So getting out there, talking to